Good evening, everyone. We have reached the 7 o'clock hour, so we will go ahead and get started. Amy Elke here from the Children and Family Services Training Center. Welcome you along with Deb DeWitz, our trainer for the evening from Family Resource and Consultants. We are in our third session of the EmergenFC training series where we are talking about foster parenting in the pandemic. Crazy, who would have thought, right? Since I know many of you are tuning in and joining us this evening to obtain some training hours, I thought we would go through just kind of a couple of housekeeping pieces here. For those of you who are tuning in for the live session, we will be taking a list of all who have registered and entered in this evening, as well as those of you who have commented in the chat box with yourself and maybe your significant other's name. We do keep record of that, and we'll be passing on a final list of attendees to all licensing agencies. So that would include kind of our zone county homes, or I should say rather licensing agencies, as well as PATH, Lutheran Social Services, YouthWorks, our tribal entities. All of them will be receiving a list of who has attended. So know that your licensing worker will have that on record. If you're anything like me and you like to keep records upon records of things and you kind of like that paper trail, you are welcome to complete the evaluation that I will email out later this evening, and that will have a downloadable certificate at the end that you can either screenshot for your records if you are kind of viewing this on your tablet or smart device in that sense, phone, whatever it be, or you're welcome to print it off if you're going to build the evaluation on a computer or something that you can print from. For those of you who are attending the recorded session, I encourage you to connect personally with your licensing worker and create kind of your own plan for how you can receive credit for that hour of training. If you do have any questions or concerns with that, feel free to reach out to us, feel free to email or give us a call, and we can certainly be helpful on that note as well. Since we do have over 200, yes, like over 200 people joining in this evening, we are set to only have a listen mode only on. So with the listen only mode, basically what that means is we have no cameras and no microphone options for folks except myself and Deb. With that being said, that does not mean we want to discourage dialogue. So I encourage you to utilize the chat box for any comments or questions, as well as, like I said earlier, if you're attending with a significant other, feel free to share both of your names in the chat box so I can make sure that both of you are receiving credit for attending this evening. With that, we've taken care of all the housekeeping pieces, but I want to pause for two reasons, just like we've done the past couple of weeks. First of all, pausing as a reminder that we are going to try to be responsive to those questions, comments as we move forward in training. This is not our typical, normal, however you want to phrase it, series of foster parent training. We are literally trying to kind of plan week to week to respond to your needs. With that being said, the next couple of weeks, we do have some pretty good ideas of things that we would like to cover in the next 3 weeks. But again, please leave your comments, questions, or send us emails for topics, ideas, needs that you have, and we will do our best to be responsive on that note. Lastly, so there were 2 reasons that I wanted you to pause. The second one would be take a pause, take a breath. If you're feeling the weight of any of this, like my house is, with kids really soaking in now to this remote learning. Last week when we rolled into this week or to the session of training, we were just kind of starting this journey of remote learning, right? We were only a couple days into it. Now we pretty much have a solid week of schooling in. As time goes on, the weight of kind of this new normal of social distancing, social isolation, working from home, many people, or those that are still working out in the community are feeling the weight, right, of this new sense of normal where we are living in these unprecedented times. Every time I hear that, I have to smirk thinking I don't think I've ever heard the word unprecedented times as much as I have in the last few weeks, right? So with that, because of this unprecedented time, we are starting to feel the weight as we roll into the first full month of the pandemic literally outside our front doors. So we have high hopes that everyone who is tuning in tonight is healthy, is okay, But we of course know that there is weight lifting, or I shouldn't say lifting, weight on our shoulders, right? So I ask you to pause, take a deep breath, exhale that out before we move into our training here, in hopes that you can have the mindset to absorb what Deb will be sharing. So with that, I'm going to pass you on to Deb. Now again, this is recorded, Deb. With the high traffic on the internet, we know that many are having technology issues and internet issues and all that jazz. So with that, again, Deb is recorded because we would hate for her to lose connectivity during the session. So this is a prior recording. Again, please use the chat box. And with that, we will have some conversation at the end. And until then, I will pass you over to Deb, and I will see you on the other side.
Well, hi there. This is Deb DeWitz coming to you with a mask on for the EmergenFC Foster Parenting in the Pandemic series, sponsored by the University of North Dakota Children and Family Services Training Center and Deb DeWitz from Family Resource Consultants. And if you're wondering why I'm wearing a mask that has these particular dots on it, it's because I'm wearing the Rosie the Riveter t-shirt today that says, "We can do it," right? Rosie the Riveter from the World War. And we all came together and are doing the best we can. But it might be a little harder for you to pay attention if I have my face covered. So since we're all social distancing already anyway, I'll just do this. So this week, I had promised you that we were going to do some, I was going to respond to some foster parents who had sent in some comments or questions. And so that's what we're going to be doing this week. I suppose I should pay attention to time here so that I'm sure that I get you out of here in an hour. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take questions that have come in from foster parents over the last few weeks and try to give you some response to that. Not that I will have all the answers, but just to give you some idea of some thoughts that I have in response. So after the first session, we had someone who said, well, what I got out of this is we're not really supposed to be correcting bad behaviors in these kids. And so, you know, that's a problem with trying to pull together something in 1 week and then trying to talk about all these complicated, complex things like trauma and PTSD in 1 hour, is that you try to cover main points, but you never come across in exactly the way you wanted to. So I'm going to try to respond to that. Yeah, of course we want you to correct their unacceptable behaviors. Yes, I mean, that is part of what we do as any kind of parent, foster parent, bio parent, whatever. What we're trying to do is to try to create a different frame for it, is to say that what you see in a lot of these kids isn't bad behavior in the sense that it's not intentional. It's not mean. It's not bratty behavior. Now, do kids do some behaviors intentionally? Well, yes, of course. Bio kids do, foster kids do, adopted kids do. Of course, we all do. But think of a time when you had a behavior that was caused by something that was out of your control. So, the time you had diarrhea, the time you had to throw up. So, even though you had a behavior that was unpleasant for you, or probably for somebody else too, it wasn't something that you did on purpose. So our point that first session was that so many of the behaviors that look like bad behaviors or that are difficult and frustrating are trauma related. So yes, the child may purposely throw something. So, I mean, it takes his arm to throw it. So that's purposeful. But what was behind that behavior wasn't, I'm going to do this just because I can. It was a level of frustration. It was a trigger. And these kids often cannot articulate what it is that's going on at the time. And their feelings, their thoughts come out as behaviors. So what we're trying to do is to help you to understand that those behaviors that are frustrating to you, that feel like bad behaviors, are really trauma-related behaviors. So that doesn't mean that when a kid throws something, you say, no, that's fine. You know, when they throw something, you say, sorry, buddy, you know the rule in this house, we don't throw things. So you say, you can't throw that, and then there's a consequence for that. But rather than thinking, you know, we told him this 100 times, I bet you have told your spouse something more than 100 times. Are there things that you and your spouse still don't agree on, and it's been more than 100 times, right? Just because somebody knows we don't want them to do something doesn't mean they're not going to do it. Another comment that came in after the first session is that it seems like what you're saying is these kids aren't going to get better. And so let me talk a little bit about that concept of what does it mean to get better? Will they ever get better? Well, every foster child is different. You know that. So when I talk about having to accept these kids, and it seems like I'm saying lower your expectations, it's not that you can't have expectations. Certainly, here's the thing. You don't need help with the easy ones. The easy ones who are meeting all your expectations, you don't need any help with those kids, right? You've already seen they got better. Matter of fact, lots of foster kids will get better in the first few weeks or the first few months. There'll be a honeymoon period. But then after that honeymoon period, just like after that first year of marriage, for some of you maybe had a first year of marriage where it was like everybody's still being nice to each other. At some point, the real us, right? The real us comes through. So, you know, somebody's messy and somebody isn't, right? So my point was for those kids where you're struggling, that's who I'm talking to about. Not that foster kids are all one group. They're all very different. So yes, lots of foster kids will get much better, but then let's measure what is better? What is better? I mean, have you ever been in a situation where you're acting better, but you're only acting better because you were afraid of your boss? Or you were acting better because you weren't really being yourself? And so, you know, we've got to really think about when we say, you know, oh, he's doing so much better. That may or may not be the real child. He or she may not yet have experienced all the emotions that have to do with this. So kids can get better and then later get worse. And in fact, they really emotionally getting worse can be a sign that they're feeling safer, because now they feel safe to do some of that acting out. They trust you enough to do some of that acting out. Now, some will get better even if you've never seen their better behavior, meaning that some of your bio teens drive you crazy. But any of you have had biological teenagers, you know, wasn't there a period of time when they drove you crazy? And didn't they get better? So some of it is developmental. As kids develop into adults, they have the ability to look back on their childhood, to look back on some of the things that happened and make more sense out of it. And they can do a level of therapy as adults that they couldn't do as kids. So even if a child leaves your home, and at the age they leave your home, maybe they're there till they're 18, and it may seem like nothing you did made a difference, but it may be that it makes a difference a long ways down the road, and you might not see it. So some of their good behavior will get worse, right? So my daughter, who was very good before she was 18, inherited the chemical dependency gene that comes through my family and struggled with chemical dependency. So, you know, one could say, well, she was better behaved in high school, but that doesn't mean she still didn't have that struggle to figure out. So my point here is you and all those professionals involved with this child cannot control the outcome for these kids. What you do is you try to have input into the outcome, but you're not necessarily going to see all of that outcome. So what we do is we do our best to enhance that outcome, to enhance the outcome. Because really, how do we measure better? If you look at this child in a wheelchair, will he ever get better? He might make progress, he might experience some successes, but is the measure of his parents' success whether he ever walks like other kids? No, because this child isn't made medically like other kids. Can he be successful in spite of the fact that he is not the same as other kids? Yes, he can. That's our point. These kids may not be like other kids, but they can be successful. But that doesn't mean that on a daily basis they're going to be able to do what other kids can do. Now, it's easier if you see somebody in a wheelchair, you know that your expectations will be modified. Doesn't mean you won't expect a kid in a wheelchair to do chores. You will. But he's not going to be able to get as close to his room in the same amount of time as another child, perhaps. So you're going to change how you parent that child. It's not that you don't have expectations, but you'll understand that they need some modification. Will this child with cancer get better? Well, you can parent as perfectly as possible, but the outcome of a child who has cancer is not about your parenting. You can follow all the directions of the professionals, but the outcome is out of your control. There'll be times when it is better and times when it is worse. Like cancer, mental health issues that some of these kids have inherited have a particular prognosis. Some of those mental health issues are more treatable, just like some cancers are more treatable. Some of those mental health issues, just like some forms of cancer, are very difficult to treat. And so that's what we're trying to say, is that you've got to understand that this child didn't pick cancer. This child didn't pick that they had a medical condition that put them in a wheelchair. And it's too easy to think that a child who's misbehaving is choosing this misbehavior, rather than understanding that some misbehaviors come from depression, some come from anxiety, some come from bipolar disorder, some come from attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, some come from fetal alcohol syndrome, some come from trauma. And these kids didn't pick any of those conditions. None of them. And they deserve the same kind of compassion and understanding as kids who didn't pick. Will this child who has cerebral palsy, will this child get better? Well, he will make progress. He'll experience successes. What is the measure of his parents' success? Whether he achieves just like other kids? No, because he's not made like other kids physically. And is the measure of your success as a foster parent whether or not your foster kids achieve or succeed just like other kids? Or like your biological kids? No. No. Because some of these kids are not going to have the same abilities genetically, medically, physically, and in terms of mental health. So you can parent all kids, your biological kids, foster kids, as perfectly as you can. But the outcome is not just controlled by your parenting. You'll follow all the directions of all the professionals, but the outcome is not under any of our control. We want to have input to enhance that outcome, but some of this is based on who the child is genetically, physically, biologically, and based on trauma. There's going to be times it's going to be better and times where it isn't better. Will this child get better? A child with Down syndrome. Again, he'll make progress. He'll experience successes. But how do we measure his parent's success or her parent's success? How do we measure your success or your foster child's success? If a child isn't like other children genetically, we of course want to have expectations, and we want to help them get better, but better may not look just like other kids. So let's look at the child on the right. The child who looks depressed, the child who may have been traumatized. You can parent as perfectly as possible, but the outcome is not determined just by your parenting and by your choices or their choices. You can follow all the directions that people give you, and sometimes behavior will be better, sometimes it won't. So what are we supposed to do? As foster parents, seems like everything I watch is so vague. Nobody ever gives us advice on how to discipline these foster kids. How do we correct these bad behaviors? We get that it's trauma. We get how it's caused. But what do we use to make it stop? And here's the sad thing. There is no magic bullet. If there's a professional out there who can say, this is the magic bullet that will make every person stop, I guarantee you they're selling that program. They're selling it, because if it were really that easy, we'd be giving it away. There's no magic bullet. Yes, there are techniques, but when we started this response to the coronavirus, when Amy and I started this, it wasn't intended to be a parenting class. that may be what some of you want or need. We're going to talk some about that, about some resources that you can use. But, you know, when I used to do parenting classes, I would do, the parenting class was 6 sessions long. 6 sessions long. And that was only for kids who weren't teenagers yet. There was a separate parenting class for teenagers, because that's how complicated it is to understand how do you get kids to do what you want them to do. It's not something we can do in an hour. It's not something that we can do just in this series. But again, we'll be giving you some resources of things to do. But again, if you really think, well, just give us the magic bullet. If there were magic bullets in human relationships and human behavior, think about your own marriage. If there were perfect ways to create change, why would we still be fighting about the same things, right? So we also had someone who said, you know, we had a foster child who was a 1 in a million kid. Literally everything we did didn't help at all. No matter what we tried to teach her, no matter how we role modeled, no matter what we did, nothing worked. And that's the frustrating part of foster parenting. What will work, even if it's just an itch? Well, let's look at these 2 kids that are sitting there. The boy on the right has cerebral palsy. He can't walk. No matter what they do, no matter what they do in this particular instance, this kid is not going to be able to walk. They can role model it. They can try to teach him how they walk. They can give him all the consequences in the world, but this child is not going to walk. Some kids with cerebral palsy can walk, but this kid can't. So his parents and his teachers allow him to use that wheelchair because that's what works. Child on the left, she has a whole bunch of things you can't see. Bipolar disorder, anxiety, attention deficit disorder, reactive attachment disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, history of child sexual abuse, father in prison, mother who's chemically dependent. Can't see any of that. This looks like a kid who should be able to use role modeling, who should be able to change after all the things you've taught her, who should get it. But see, that's the thing about these kids, is on the outside, they look so normal. They look so normal. And so it's hard to remember that their struggles are as serious. Again, not all foster kids, but some of these foster kids have struggles that are as serious as a child who is in a wheelchair. In a sense, some of them are in an emotional or mental health wheelchair. And that's why we say compassion. It isn't that you don't correct their bad behaviors. Yes, if this boy with cerebral palsy has an unacceptable behavior, then you make him stop it. He can't hit somebody. He can't wave his scissors in front of his sister's face. You're going to stop it, right? But if this kid is so frustrated because he can't run and everybody else is out having fun and he's pitching a fit, you will understand his frustration. And that's what we're asking you to do with the little girl on the left, is to understand her frustration. We want you to give her the same amount of compassion and to see how much she is struggling. So yes, correct the unacceptable behaviors as best you can, but base it on what you've seen work with this child. It's not about a magic bullet from a parenting class. What works? What works? I mentioned to you, my oldest daughter is very ADHD, and when she was in school, the recommendation at the time was, clear off a desk, make it absolutely clear with nothing on it, have no television, no radio, nothing to distract, just her homework and make her do her homework and that was all the suggestions. And we tried all kinds of things that everybody suggested. And homework was a nightmare every night in 4th grade. And then I ended up hiring someone to come in after school to do after school care, because as a university professor, I couldn't be home when she got home from school. And so long story, but anyway, somebody came in after school. And as soon as she had hired, my daughter's homework was done before I got home from work at 5:30. So I said to the person, you can't be doing her homework for her. And she said, I'm not. And I said, okay, knowing full well that she was doing something, because otherwise this homework would not be done before I got home at 5:30. So all week long, my daughter's homework was done before I got home. So Friday, I decided I'm going to go home early. And I'm going to catch her either doing her homework or feeding me the answers or something. It was in my daughter's handwriting, sloppy handwriting, but clearly she was helping her. So I walk in the door at 3:30, 4 o'clock Friday afternoon to catch them. And here's the person that I hired to be there after school. And she was vacuuming the living room. And while she was vacuuming, my daughter was over about this far from the television set with her math homework on her lap. And of course, the television had to be cranked up really loud because she couldn't hear it over the vacuum cleaner. And she was talking on the phone to a friend of hers. So she had the television cranked up, the vacuum cleaner going, she's talking to a friend on the phone doing her math homework. And I walk in the door and I look at all this and I'm like, what is even going on here? So of course I get all the noise stopped. I said, what's going on? And she says, oh, Glee's doing her homework. And I said, you can't do your homework like that. And she goes, oh yeah, it's way easier to do my homework like this. As long as I got a bunch of other things for my mind to be focused on, then I don't hate my homework so much. So here's an ADHD kid that I'd never paid attention to what worked with her because I was listening to all the professionals. And what we found is that this kid could do her homework best if she had 14 things going on at once. But I learned a lot about you have to be a detective to see what works for your kids. Don't presume that somebody else has the answer. You be the good detective. You think of using what do you call that, magnifying glass, right, to see when do your kids have good behavior. So many of these kids will get better, yeah, and they do get better. But be aware of how you measure better. Because you know what? I teach social work. And I had a lot of social workers in my classes over the years who were once foster kids or who were once in a ton of trouble with the courts. And they grew up and they got better. But nobody saw it when they were young. So we can give you techniques on how to discipline foster kids. That doesn't mean they're going to have good behavior. The words and actions you use to help them should be the words and actions you would use with if a child was scared, if a child needed reassurance. So that's what we're trying to say, is that if you switch in your own mind from this kid is being bad or mean to this kid doesn't have his behavior under his control for reasons that I probably don't understand. So I have to stop that behavior, but I'm not going to consider it bad. I wouldn't consider it bad if a child in a wheelchair couldn't walk. I wouldn't consider it bad if a child has mental health issues and they're struggling and it's coming up behaviorally because they don't have the ability to have it come out through their mouth. So you would catch a child who was falling. So you'd be patient with a child who had cognitive limits. So use those techniques. Catch these kids when they're being bad. Help them to stop, but do that with understanding. Now we're going to do a couple more sessions. As I said, and we're going to get more specific about some parenting things in future sessions. But for this session, what we're doing is answering parent questions. So what am I saying? A startled kid will drop a glass of milk, but you're not going to scream at them. If you startled them, right? You came in and they go, ah! And you're not going to scream at them for that. You're going to say, sorry, buddy, I didn't mean to scare you, right? You reassure the child. Yes, you're going to leave the milk and you're going to have them clean it up, right? But a child who you see as misbehaving now during all this change might not need discipline, might need reassurance. Hey, buddy, I know this is really hard right now. I know it's been really hard to be trying to do all your homework at home, so let's take a break. Rather than, you can't do this until you are done. Trying to say reassurance, taking breaks, not seeing it as we talked last week, not seeing it as it having to be punishment, but to reset. Any consequences? Yes, but that is not necessarily going to change their behaviors. So just this week, my grandson was just having a rough day. And that night when he was going to bed, he said, I'm really sorry I was so crazy today, Mom. I just miss playing with my friends so much. So he's used to having a ton of kids around him every day at childcare. So all of a sudden, dad's trying to work from home, mom's been sick, he's supposed to play by himself. What's that? So if you get that 1 in a million foster child, remember that it's like having a child who has a 1 in a million medical condition. Nothing may work to change a child with a 1 in a million medical condition. You all know somebody who has, unfortunately, had to bury a child because they could not change that child's 1 in a million medical condition. And so there are going to be some kids that you have to love them like they are, even though they're very difficult kids. So the measure of a foster parent is not whether or not a child has no bad behaviors. So the question has to be, is that really our measure of a child? Whether or not they have bad behaviors? So a child can't change if they have cancer or Down syndrome, cerebral palsy, or any medical condition. And these children can't change that they have mental health issues and trauma. So you work with the child in spite of their challenges. Child with ADHD doesn't change. I was an ADHD child. I'm still an ADHD old lady. But I've learned how to work with that, right? I used to get in trouble for talking too much, and now people pay me for talking too much, right? So learn techniques that help them succeed and then teach them those techniques. A child with trauma can and hopefully will get better. Our point that first session was hopefully not to make them worse through not understanding them through this trauma. So many foster children have hidden disabilities caused by mental health issues and trauma. We ask you to adjust your expectations in your parenting as you would if you could see those issues. Now, in terms of some very specific resources, Foster Parent College. So please jot this down, fosterparentcollege.com. Not that hard to find, fosterparentcollege.com. And here's what they sent out, March 16th, 2020. Foster Parent Service Center, Call Center, online services are open to serve you. They have strong content. You can read this. They're going to have a high level of customer service during the workday. Thanks a lot. Although now we are struggling during the workday. It's not just nights and weekends because we have them all day. So they are there and they have a number that you can call. Here's the number. Oh, wait, that's the wrong one. They have a number that you can call, so please log on to fosterparentcollege.com. They have a ton of training for foster parents at Foster Parent College and free. So we really do suggest that you connect with fosterparentcollege.com because that's what it's for. It's for foster parents. And they do get that this is a tough time. As you can see, they are trying to serve people as well. Now, another resource that you might want to jot down is loveandlogic.com. And here's the Love and Logic number. And they have a ton of things that you can buy, but they also have a lot of resources that you can access for free. So working with challenging kids, a lot of people have really liked the Love and Logic part for challenging kids, not only because they give you suggestions for what to do with the kids, but in some ways it also helps you to understand what you can and cannot do. So lots of YouTube videos on Love and Logic techniques. So if you've never taken a Love and Logic course, I would recommend that you look up a Love and Logic. I already covered this one. Why aren't we doing parenting classes? Because that would be a long-term commitment. And if we had started this and said, we expect you to tune in for the next 18 weeks, you'd have all said, no. So there we go. Now, another question that came in was, how are we supposed to distance in our own homes? I have bio kids and foster kids in my home, and I'm watching all these updates, and they're saying, here's what you should do. You should, keep people separate. And how do we work that when we have all these different kids of different ages, bio kids, foster kids? According to these guidelines, we're not supposed to have them in the same rooms, in the same house, and say blah, blah, blah. How do you quarantine when we have so many kids in the same house? And of course, my answer is, well, we should be asking doctors that question because Amy and I aren't doctors. However, please note that it does say that everyone on the news is saying quarantine them as much as possible. My understanding, and again, I'm not a doctor, my understanding is most of the time people are contagious before they even know they have it. For most of us, that idea that we are going to quarantine within our own homes and other people aren't going to get it probably isn't all that likely, in the sense that we see families having it in clusters because people do have it before they know they have it. So yes, as much as possible, we are going to try, to be wiping down doorknobs and wiping down cupboards, knobs and all those kinds of things they're suggesting. But the likelihood that if somebody in the family gets it, everybody living in the same space is going to get it is, from my understanding, pretty high. So you are the best expert in how you can best utilize your house. So it may be that if somebody in your house gets sick, you will play fruit basket upset. And you may say, okay, this is going to be the room where if you're feeling crummy, we're going to put a bunch of air mattresses on the floor. We're going to put a bunch of blankets on the floor. And this is where we're going to have the room for people when they're not feeling good. You may say, I'm not moving anybody because these kids can't transition. And that's what we're talking about here, is that these kids need you to think about who they are. And you have the right to advocate for that. So you might say, I am going to do as much as I can. I'm going to do whatever I can as much as possible, but it is not possible to tell this traumatized foster child that he cannot be in his, regular bed because he finally got to the point where he can be in it, and we're not going to go backwards. So you're the expert in how to best utilize your home. My recommendation is that you call your social worker, your case manager, whoever that is, and tell them what your plan is in your mind, just so that you can know, okay, this is what I have told them. And then ask them, do you have a better suggestion? Because here's the deal. Most of the time, they haven't maybe thought through this. If you think of it first and you say, do you have a better suggestion? And they say, no, not really. Okay, good. Now your plan is good. All right. And if they say, well, you really need to keep them in separate rooms. Great. Why don't you come on out and show me how to do that? And of course, they're not supposed to. So my point is, you are an expert. Now, we also, I recommended to Amy that she contact DHS and ask them to address this issue. Because at least some of you are going to be concerned about, will there be any liability issues if a child gets sick while under our care? And of course, you always have that concern because the child could get sick or injured anytime they're under your care. But I'm sure people are thinking about it a bit more. Whether DHS will give us a response, I'm not sure. But again, trust some of your own instincts for, your house best, your kids best. So think through. If I have a child that has a difficult time with transitions, then how can I keep that kid's world more the same? If I have a child who doesn't like to be around other people, well, then putting all the sick kids in one room is not going to be a good idea. See what I'm saying about how you've got to think through this? And as long as you have thought through it and you can say, this is why I did what I did, and you've got solid reasons for it, most times those will be just fine. But let your caseworker or case manager or social worker know. Now, someone said, do you have any great ideas for how to do online meetings for kids and bio parents? Now, I wasn't, first I wrote, well, no, I don't, right? It is all new to everybody. Then I also said, I'm not sure what you meant, but if you mean, well, they wanted physical visits. Well, here's the thing. When you want physical visits, I mean, don't you wish you could go out with your friends and your grandparents, and aren't you wishing you hug your mom and dad? So some kids may be asking for physical visits, even though we probably can no longer do those. So I think that's a struggle for kids, is they want the same things we want. They want to be able to get together and touch and be reassured. So you've got to, in an age-appropriate way, talk about why that can't happen, right? So with little kids, whatever you're using, maybe you're calling it the coronavirus, or maybe you're calling it the bad germ, right? Well, until the bad germ, is taken care of, then everybody's just trying to keep everybody else really safe, blah, blah, blah. One really important thing is listen to their grief rather than argue. So often a kid says, and then we try to say, well, but you can't because that. And really what they need us to do is listen. Can you tell me more about that? Well, I'm never going to see my mom anymore. It's going to be really hard, buddy. So rather than arguing, listen, let them get that out. Because when they're pitch and fit, when they're saying things, too often, instead of listening to what they're saying and letting them say it, even if it's over and over and over, and using that listening technique of when they tell you something, you parrot it back. Sounds like you're really frustrated. I'm really frustrated too because I don't get to see my dad and mom. And I know it's not the same, buddy, but that's got to be really hard. So not arguing with them, not giving them all the rational reasons. I mean, you need to give that to them maybe once a day, but mostly what they need is someone to hear that they're scared, that they're frustrated. And saying, I'm sorry, I just can't do that. It's not my decision. Only people that live in the same house can be together right now. I'm so sorry. It has to be hard. What are you worried about the most? Give them a chance to talk. Now, somebody said, I think Amy said that she had heard that one of the issues was sort of the whole visual aspect. It's like when we do Zoom meetings, that means that people can see into my biological parents' house and my biological parents can see into my foster parents' house. And there's that issue of how do people feel about that? Lots of biological parents are very frightened of the system. I would be. If they took my kids, I'd be really scared to have somebody see into my house. So, are there ways that you can make suggestions so that people can't necessarily see as much? So you say, well, how about if we aim the camera toward the wall? How about if we aim the camera? Let's just do this in the chair right here, just you. They don't need to see the whole house. So like I attempted the first day when I put up the screen behind me, there might be ways that you can create a little visitation space. It doesn't have to be a room, but just a little visitation space. My grandkids have been making tents out of the furniture. So you put a blanket between two couches or a couch and a table, whatever. You put a blanket over a table. And so just creating a space where the child can have some privacy, where the child doesn't feel like they're exposing each of those homes to the other home. So just a suggestion that I had. So somebody said, how do we deal with biological parents' visits? It's absolutely, we know this time is crazy for these kids. They're all having PTSD moments from everything that's already happening. So would it be unheard of for foster parents to ask for less visits? And my answer is, well, of course it's not unheard of. Foster parents ask for less visits all the time. And foster parents can ask anything at any time. So it isn't a matter of whether you can. The question is whether it's a good idea. So each child, each situation is different. An older child who was mostly responsible for their parents is going to worry more about their parents during a time when everybody's scared. When I say older child, I don't necessarily mean a 16-year-old. It might be the 6-year-old child who was the oldest child in her family. And so as such, she was the one who was getting breakfast for the other kids because mommy's chemically dependent and didn't get up in the morning. And so that 6-year-old may see herself as her parent's caregiver. So when you cut down on those visits, thinking that you're helping her because she doesn't have to worry, she may worry more, which is why we have to listen to these kids when they say, I want to see my mom, I want to see my dad. So can you tell me more about that? I'm worried about her, or whatever. So we've got to look at each situation being different, because some kids might be like, yeah, whatever. Other kids, it's going to be a big deal. Just like with you, if you have biological kids, your biological kids are different. And so are foster kids. So if you feel like you want to have fewer visits, then I think you have to you have to talk about that with a social worker or a case manager, talk about that with the therapist, talk about that with the child after talking with those other professionals. But I think first you have to talk with yourself and say, why am I thinking less visits is better? would it be better because it'd be less work for me? And you do have to take care of yourself. So if you're saying, I can't do this anymore, well, then it might be a good idea. But if it's just that, every time she has a visit, there's a day of meltdown afterwards. You ever sent your kids to their grandparents for the weekend? They don't come back different, right? Kids are different after they have a change. And part of that is they don't have the words to talk about what they're feeling and experiencing. So I know people who say, I got back from vacation and I had such a hard time transitioning back to work. Same thing, right? You go back to your job and for the first couple of days, you're maybe like, I hate being here. But we're adults. We have the ability to talk about it. We have the ability to think about it and get through it. And talk about your concerns. So, and again, if the child is 2, that's a different thing. But if the child is older and you say, buddy, here's one of the things, I keep saying buddy, but obviously there are foster girls, and I don't care if you call your foster girls buddy. But anyway, so you say, hey kiddo, what I've noticed is that you don't say this when they're in the middle of a meltdown, but at a later time when things are going well. I've noticed that sometimes when you talk to your mom, even though I know you like talking to your mom, then for a little while, you seem a little mad at me. And I'm just wondering if you feel kind of mad at me after you talk to your mom. I know you don't do it on purpose. Just kind of wondering. I'm not mad at you. Do you ever just feel mad inside? You sometimes just feel mad in your tummy or mad in your head, right? Because the child may be able to talk about that. They may not. Again, not everybody's able to talk about their feelings, but at least chatting with the child. Now, it is normal for us to struggle when we worry, but cutting us off doesn't make us worry less, and it won't necessarily make us struggle less. So my question to you is, are you wanting to connect more with the people that you love? I mean, I see people, oh my God, Facebook has exploded. Several of my friends have said, well, didn't you see my post? Are you kidding? Who has time to see everything that's on Facebook, right? It's just exploded because people are posting everything. Their 10 favorite albums that changed their life, and the social distancing fashion show, and the I don't know what else. It's like there's all this stuff, right? Because people are trying to connect. They want to connect. And so, can you help them to feel a sense of connection? And sometimes that can be things like having them draw pictures for their biological parents, having them write a song, whatever it could be, paint on a rock that they can give their biological mom the next time they see her. So giving them the opportunity to express some things, even when they don't have a chance to see their biological parents. And then, very good questions. They didn't say it quite this way, but what do I do if this all blows up and I need some help? All right, first session we talked about do everything you can not to have this placement disrupt. But in spite of being in contact with a social worker or case manager, in spite of doing everything the very best way that you can, things happen. And so may there be a placement that disrupts during this time, or may there be a time when you just can't take it? So this foster parent said, some of these kids have very deep emotional needs. Yep. Now that therapy is not in person, I was wondering what's the best plan if these kids need more therapeutic attention. And the therapists are now just seeing them online. They're telling everyone to avoid hospitals and clinics as much as possible. What's the plan? Again, nobody told us we should get a plan ready. Nobody told us that there was going to be a quarantine. So do I know what the plan for these kids is? No, I sure don't. But you're going to want to know what the plan is. So call the therapist. Call the social worker, the case manager. If you have a child that you think is likely or has in the past gotten to a situation where they needed maybe a crisis bed or shelter care or psychiatric inpatient hospitalization, then call your therapist, call your social worker case manager and say, what are we going to do if we get there again? I'm doing everything I can to hold this together. to keep this child safe, physically, emotionally, in every way. But if I end up in a situation where I need help, what's the plan? Now, some therapists might be able to do more than once a week. All of a sudden, therapists can do online therapy, right? So that's been a great thing that's happened, is we now have access to something that was previously not really that available. But, you know, there isn't anything magic about once a week. Well, there may be for some insurance companies, so you'll have to check with your therapist about that. But it may be that your therapist could do 2 sessions a week. And maybe that your therapist would be willing to have an emergency session, if that were the case. So just ask, what are my options here? The last thing they want is for this placement to disrupt. So make a plan with your social worker or case manager, right? Because I don't know what you have in your region, even on a good day, but I certainly don't know what you have in your region right now in terms of respite or crisis bed or any of those kinds of things. Find out what they do suggest. Now, knowing that they will want you to take the child back, right? I mean, even if they go to a crisis bed, even if they went to an inpatient, you know, a short-term inpatient because they were suicidal, they're going to want you to take the child back. And your sense is going to be, well, now they've been to a hospital, now they've been exposed to a lot of other people. They haven't been in quarantine. Wow, I really, much as I want to help this child know that they are wanted, I really don't want them to have been somewhere else. And again, what does that do? Hopefully it just helps you to do everything you can to avoid that happening, which includes what we talked about last week, lowering some expectations. Lowering some expectations. Okay, and so what I have to say to you is thank you all very much for responding, for sending in questions or comments. And we can't answer them all, but we try to take ones that we think kind of represent what a lot of foster parents might be thinking or wondering about. This is me pulling my hair out, trying to do a presentation every week. But we hope they're helpful. So in terms of a future cast or what's coming up ahead, we are going to do a session next week on techniques for parenting kids who have focus or attention problems. So, you know, you've all got kids who you tell them to do something and they don't do it. You know, they're not 1 in a million kids, but they are kids that are more challenging for sure. So we're going to spend a session just talking about parenting those kind of kids. The week after that, our plan is to spend time talking about kids who have been or may have been impacted by chemicals while in utero. So, you know, they call these kids different things, FASD, FAE, fetal alcohol effects, fetal alcohol syndrome. So we're going to spend some time talking about that. And then the session after that, our current plan, depending on what comes in from all of you, our current plan is to have a session on making sure you're taking care of yourselves. And so, you know, that's where we are. That's what we're planning. If you have other suggestions, please let us know. This will not go on forever, I guarantee you. You will be released from this prison of the quirky and cheesy Deb DeWitts. But just wanted to connect with you again this week. It's a little shorter this week, so it means you can have 15 minutes just to talk amongst yourselves maybe, because we've been doing some of that in the chat box and people have been finding that useful. And Amy, we're going to talk a little bit about what she's hoping to propose for local regions in terms of having you find a way to connect during all of this. But for tonight, this has been Deb DeWitts coming to you for the Children and Family Services Training Center. We appreciate your being here, and more than anything, I want you to know how much we appreciate what you are doing for these kids. You truly are amazing people, truly amazing people. Thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Good night.
Okay, whirlwind of information for sure. Want to chat with you for just a couple moments. about kind of some additional comments I have on top of Deb's wonderful information, but I know we do have folks, if we're right around the 8 o'clock hour, if you do need to get off, not a big deal. But wanted just to go through again, of course, certificates, you can find those in the evaluation kind of at the end if you complete that. I know we had a couple of folks commenting on the need for social work CEUs. So again, comment in the chat box, say that you need that, or email me, either way. I believe I'm caught up for the last 2 sessions of giving people certificates. If you did not get yours, feel free to pester. That's for sure. I will gladly take the gentle reminder to make sure I get you that certificate. And then I know you commented, some of the folks commented that they'd really like kind of the information on foster parent college, the Love and Logic links. Those links I will include in the evaluation email as well, so you'll have those. Wanted to take a second on the foster parent college piece. I know Deb commented that it was free, which it is and it isn't, okay, for foster parents. So when you go to register for some of those courses, it does come up with saying that you need to pay $10, $20, $30, depending on like the number of credits, number of hours. So I think often they're around $10, or if they're multiple hours, it's, you know, $20, $30, but that would be for like 3-4 hours of training. Now those would count at this point as online credit, non-face-to-face hours. But what I will tell you is, if those of you, I spoke to a foster parent earlier today that they were really worried about those hours, and wonderful that Deb's willing to hang out with us and we get an hour of live face-to-face training each week right now. But still, if we do that, that may not get enough for some of the folks, especially those that were maybe looking at attending our Grand Forks Festival, which landed right in the middle of this pandemic, you know, a couple weeks ago, that we had to postpone, now maybe canceled. We'll just kind of see where things land. I don't know yet in that regard. But nonetheless, even with these, it may not get you to your full credit of hours. And so with that, go ahead and use those resources like Foster Parent College or Love and Logic, that sort of thing. But with that, what I would say is, when you look to see those questions about how are we going to pay for this, those sort of things, go ahead and email our office, because we do have some resources to pay for those costs of those registrations for like Foster Parent College, even maybe even Love and Logic, depending on the fit, kind of that sort of thing. So maybe connect with your caseworker or email myself, or even email kind of the general CFSTC email account right off our website. That's kind of what a lot of your emails come from, either myself or the training center. So email us, we can hook you up with kind of how we can go ahead and reimburse some of those costs, because we certainly don't want costs to be a barrier for getting you the information that you need to kind of serve the kiddos in your care. So with that being said, I think that kind of covers the training side in regards to questions I had on that. Wanted to also make a comment here. I know that there was the statement and kind of the question that Deb had answered in regards to how do you self-quarantine if someone in your house tests positive? And I'm thankful that I was able to reach out to our permanency administrator, Kelsey Bless, and they are in the works of publishing kind of an addition to their frequently asked questions on the Department of Human Service Center website. And so with that, I'll kind of read you what's going to be kind of released here. It's really recommended that you follow kind of the guidance provided by the CDC, North Dakota Public Health, and your medical professionals. Okay, so recommending that you following whatever they're saying. Our central office, our North Dakota Children and Family Services Division, totally recognizes the notion that isolation in a family home may be difficult. Physical separation and physical isolation for an individual who tests positive is required, right, in efforts best we can to hopefully minimize the risk to others, including maybe rearranging some of those sleeping arrangements, okay, for others kind of in the household. But the end of the day, our permanency division, I shouldn't really say division, Children and Family Services Division, I spoke to the permanency administrator. But anyways, they're just really recommending that you connect with your caseworker to either form a plan now, or in the case that you do have someone testing positive. So you can kind of walk through what's best for your home, your situation, those involved. All those specifics are kind of the beautiful social work answer of it depends, right? we can't lay out that this is going to work well for the one household when it won't work for the next. So again, connecting with your caseworker to figure out that individualized plan. So that's kind of all I had in kind of the feedback from the rest of the session. I'll maybe pass on some pieces to Deb here. Deb, I don't know if you want to share anything in particular.
First off, can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Okay.
I can hear you and see you, so.
Okay.
Yes.
I can't see me, so I have no idea if you're looking at my nose or not, but you know, hopefully it's a great look. Just going to say that because I'm on my phone because of the technology problems, I couldn't see I could see like the first 3 words of what showed up in the chat box. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to see what people might have been commenting tonight. So Amy will send me that chat because she can send me a copy of the chat so that I can see what kind of comments that people had. But from what I could see, it sounded like people were looking forward to the 2 topics that you and I had kind of planned, working with kids who have focus problems and working with kids who may have in utero exposure to alcohol or drugs. So it looks like we were kind of on the right track there. And so we'll just plan to see people next week.
Wonderful. I'm just kind of glancing through. I was making a couple notes on comments that people had. I know there were some technology issues. A couple of you had to log out and then log back in. So Deb can empathize with your fun technology issues.
Yes.
You can totally blame me for all of that, because before the session started, I was like, okay, hopefully we won't have any technology issues. We're going to be good to go. And then Deb wasn't getting on. So it's totally my fault that I jinxed us all for that. So I apologize. We will have this, just like we have the other 2, posted on our website. So you can rewatch again or share with those in your foster community world, as well as those maybe even outside of that. We've heard from a couple folks. One caseworker in particular said, hey, can I share these with a neighbor and kind of another friend, because I think some of the content really does fit with what they're struggling with. So definitely share this with whomever you think it could benefit. That would be great. I think last but not least, I know we have kind of a long weekend coming up, so I would put my plug in for those folks to, we have kids who have managed they've managed a full week of school, right? 3 days last week, 2 days this week, that's a full week of school, broken up with a weekend in between, which was very much, I think, to our advantage, right? That our kids got a little bit of a break. But I'm hoping that, you know, you can take kind of the longer weekend and regroup as a family unit, and hopefully refocus to gear up for more school to come. So I'm hoping you can get some good family time in. Wishing you lots of good self-care, maybe if you can sneak that in. I know as a caregiver, parent that way, that can be few and far between, right? But taking those moments to take our deep breaths and seeking self-care in when we can, right? We can't pour from an empty cup, the good old saying, right? So I encourage you to take time this weekend for that, if possible. I know some of you still will be working, so managing wearing 2, 4, 7 hats, right, at once. Wishing you luck with that. We will tune in next week. We'll get back on our Thursday gig. Okay, so we'll be back on Thursdays. I know a number of you kind of tuned in last night or tried to. My guess is we'll maybe have some folks tomorrow night, and we'll kind of see what we have for numbers. If we go ahead and open the floor for tomorrow night or not, we'll have to see. But I think that about sums it up for the night. I know we've had a couple comments in the chat box, but overall, I think we've kind of addressed most of them. If not, we'll see what we can do to address those other comments to come. So any other thoughts from folks, you can go ahead and share those now. But if not, I think we're maybe good to go for the night. So Deb, do you have any other thoughts before we end for the night?
No, I think we're good to go. And we will see you next week.
Wonderful. Okay, have a good long weekend. Everyone take care, stay safe, and we will see you in a little over a week. So
all right, stay healthy, everyone. And again, thanks for everything you do. We appreciate it so much.
Indeed, indeed. Perfect way to end the night. So thank you and take care.
Bye-bye.